Welcome back, guys. Okay, so I had a email from one of my patrons, Ben. Thanks for supporting the channel, Ben. He had some questions, and I'm going to try to fit the answers to those questions in some of the videos. I'm going to dedicate this video right now to the main part of his question, which is poison ivy. So let's talk about how I deal with poison ivy. It'll be similar to any kind of noxious plant that you have. Only a very little bit of this video will be directly applicable only to poison ivy. All plants work like this, and plants that really want to live, especially stuff that loves the shade like poison ivy, you're going to have to just do the energy in versus energy out thing and just starve it of energy. So we're going to do that today. Stick around, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so first thing, if I can, I actually leave it alone. It's actually a valuable bird food. They love the berries. Unfortunately, they poop the berry seeds out and then they spread it. But if I don't have to get rid of it, I don't. I try not to. The property's just too big. If I had a smaller property, it'd be different. But the property's too big, so if it's not in my way, then I let it do its job in the ecosystem, which is to keep me out of it, keep that area wild. An option you can try is to smother it. So however this looks, I'm using these tarps right now. These are wild apple trees that I graft some late season holding apples on for deer so that they have food in the time of year where they're most at need of food and then come and eat my trees. So I try to find late season apples and graft them onto these wild apple trees. And now I'm using these tarps. I also in the past have used these here, basically just sheets of plywood, put them down and smother them, because no plant can handle getting zero photosynthesis. That's just what plants need. They need photosynthesis, so if you can starve it of photosynthesis, then you can kill them. This whole area, if you kind of look back further, you can see how far I've tarped. You can see some of the pine needles on top, so it's been extremely effective. This was just a carpet of poison ivy, and it had gone further back. I've since pulled some of the tarps forward, and in the back area there's actually no poison ivy at all, so it has worked very well. What it will do though is, because the plant wants to survive, is it'll actually get really aggressive, sending runners out past the tarp and shoot them up. So for example, I have never had poison ivy here before, and for the most part I don't. I have comfrey that I'm kind of using as a wall, but if you actually look down, I do have some poison ivy here now. So that means that this plant kind of got angry at what I was doing, killing it, and it shot a long runner out to go as far as possible, and it's popped up here now. So this is very effective. The amount of poison ivy I had in here was unbelievable. But when you do this, just watch out for it shooting runners out. Okay, so the thing about poison ivy that makes it react with your skin is an oil in it called urushiol oil, and it's an extremely stable oil. So if you put gloves on to handle it, and then you pull it and you have that oil on the gloves, and then you hang them up, overalls, whatever, and it gets on those things and you hang them up, it's so stable that it can stay on those for years, like between 2 to 5, or even some people say 5 to 10 years. It's very stable, so just be careful what you're using it with, and really give a good rinse to all the tools when you're done with it, and then rinse your whole self off when you're done, if you're going to handle any of the poison ivy. Be really careful about putting gloves on, handling it, and then picking them up next week to go do gardening. You're going to get that oil all over yourself. Okay, same plant. Another thing you can do is actually gear up, get like double layer gloves right up to the elbow. You want long gloves, full pants, like basically think a hazmat suit. You want to go for something like that, because as you're digging it out, oils will kind of mist into the air and get on your body and cause a rash down the road. You think you've been perfectly safe, but you weren't. So you can actually get in there, especially on these runners, because the roots the rhizome underneath the ground is fairly weak, you can get in there, pull it up a bit, and then just dig your hand underneath the root the whole way. Find where it attaches to the heart plant, like there'll be a deep taproot somewhere, and then see if you can pull that up. If you can get that main root up, then you can kill the whole plant and all of its little rhizomes. Some of it might try to root and live if you say you fragment one of them off, but it's very devastating to the plant. So if you can, getting up, digging them out is extremely effective. It's just it's a pain in the butt to suit up, and you're going to be handling it, so you're probably going to get poison ivy. I did that on the front street garden where I had a bunch of poison ivy, and it hasn't come back in about 2 years. So I think it's gone. Alright, so forgive the noise from the neighbors. This is the pawpaw guild here, the lower area. I got pawpaws, apples that I also graft onto, a willow, a bunch of herbs and comfrey everywhere. And then I want to try to see if pawpaws and black walnut will survive and play well together. So there's black walnut here that I put in, and this whole edge of the forest is covered with poison ivy, as you can see. So it will continuously creep out. You can see I've attempted to smother it. You can see basically where the light has been starved out and things have died, but it's come back now. The tarps basically got holes in them, just cheap tarps. But I mow here, so another option you can do is basically just cutting it, because you can see where I mow, it hasn't been able to creep out at all, even though there's some shadier areas in here. This whole area is fairly shady, so it hasn't been able to creep out because I'm constantly mowing it. So it'll send a rhizome runner out, that's a lot of energy wasted. It'll send a shoot up, that's a lot of energy wasted, and then I come and cut it. So I make it waste all that energy. So if you can continuously make it waste energy by constantly mowing it, then you can starve it out of energy. But just be aware that when you're mowing it, you're shredding it, you're volatilizing the oils into the air, you're splashing it around, you're probably going to get it on yourself. So just be cautious of that. Make sure it's trapped in a bag and then it's properly handled, and just be careful how you handle that waste bag, because those oils, like I said before, they can last for between 5 and 10 years on something. Got some nice Rosa rugosa popping up. Okay, now glyphosate is another solution if you wanted to use Roundup. I don't use it myself. I know some people will use it for, they won't use it for anything, but they will use it for poison ivy. So they have a very high tolerance level. I suggest at least being like that, and then spot applying it onto the plant and not just spraying it everywhere, because you'll kill everything around. You'll kill all your biodiversity as well. And the root of the poison ivy will probably respond and bounce back before all the other herbaceous layer stuff that you just killed. So if you're going to do Roundup, just really do a very controlled spot application of it. But again, there's other methods that work. So for me, I just don't use that kind of stuff. Okay, so here's the entrance to the wetland guild down there. And if anyone's seen some of my Reddit posts, I did a huge year where I got 1,200 leaf bags, and I piled them up here, and they were roughly 8 feet tall. I had poison ivy in here, and I thought I'm gonna just put the leaf bags here, let them sit for a while, smother the poison ivy out. And then what I did is I planted golden seal and hops into this area as well, and let it spread, and hopefully that would work. And you can see that it mostly actually did. The reason I'm showing you this is that attempting to outcompete poison ivy can work, I really do think, as long as it's combined with a smothering, so that when the poison ivy pops up after it's been smothered, that it's outcompeted as well, immediately outcompeted. But what you might be able to see here is right in the edges, it's actually popped back up. So it survived underneath all that, and now it's trying to get a foothold back in. So you can potentially outcompete it. The problem with trying to outcompete it, so for example, if I put raspberries in here, they'd be a little taller, a little thicker. But the problem when you try to outcompete it is
that you don't know if it's just happily existing underneath, say, burdock back there, and there's a happy little poison ivy back in there. So you don't know if it's just hiding under there. If you don't have to enter into this space, then you can try to do that. But for example, I can look at this and think this is all golden seal and hops, and then, you know, there's some here, there's some here, and it's starting to creep out over here. Okay, and moving just over to the side here, we've got some lily of the valley, some ash trees, birch, hawthorn, oh, not a hawthorn, buckthorn, sorry. And we got poison ivy existing right kind of underneath the canopy of these. What I've done here is it comes right out. Actually, there's some right here. That's a little too far right there. That's a little too far out in the path. So what I have here is I have a set of scissors that I only use for the poison ivy. And look, there's some coming out right here onto the path. And if you look at the pathway, right, like that's a fairly commonly trafficked area, and I've got some poison ivy creeping out, and you know, like I'm in my sandals. So what I also have is a specific set of scissors that I use only for this, and I'll basically just snip it anywhere I see it. I won't touch it. I'll just snip it and I'll just leave it there where it is, and basically just continuously chop and drop it and starve it of energy to feed the other stuff. It is never going to be perfect because you're not actually getting at the host plant. Like, the main plant is way back in there, so I'd have to get in there and dig and rummage around just to get at it. I have in the past dug up runners from here, so obviously I missed at least part of the host plant, or I missed an entire host plant somewhere in there at the back. But basically, you know, like, it's one plant and it'll send out runners everywhere, and those will root on the way as they go. So when you are just getting a poison ivy incursion, because maybe birds drop some seed, it's easy to get rid of. When it's something like this, where it's been there for 30 plus years, it's very difficult to get rid of it. So this area here, I pretty much have resigned myself that I'm just going to keep mowing it, and that's an area I'm just never going to walk into. I could solve it if I want, but I don't really need to get into there, so I'll just kind of let it exist there, because it's all around me. Like, every single one of my neighbors has, like, all the roadsides are basically like this, a carpet of poison ivy in spots. So I'm not so concerned with birds spreading the seeds, because they're going to do that anyways. And I'd just like to point something out. You know, I'm not a grass guy, and this is one of the reasons why. So it has been a very dry spring and summer, as you guys all know. You can see me up there. Actually, I'm watering the pond because I've had so much evaporation that I'm trying to get some water back into the pond. Normally the rainwater will kind of help fill it up, but it's going a little low just based off of evaporation. That's how little water we've had. Grasses are all dying. This is where the septic tank leaches out, so this area should be a lot better than it is, because it's, you know, getting something at least, but the grasses are just dead everywhere. But look at how happy the gardens are. Haven't watered these at all. Like, they've looked better for sure, but considering everything around them's dying, you know, the Jerusalem artichokes are just loving it. Just absolutely loving their life in this super, super dry season. Clover is doing really well. And, you know, how often do you have a tomato plant that's basically not been watered at all year? And it's not the best tomato plant ever, but it's going to put tomatoes on. I'll probably want to water it soon, because once it starts actually putting tomatoes on, then it'll actually need quite a bit more water. And the raspberries are coming. The hazelnuts are doing well. So, you know, you plant in these dense polycultures and they become very, very drought resistant. Okay, another thing some people do with some weeds is they get a propane burner and they'll burn them. Don't do this with poison ivy. If you inhale the urushiol oil into your lungs, you can actually die from that. So never, ever, ever, ever burn poison ivy.